Imagine this, me, Ryan Keller, 45, hands still smelling like copper wire and grief, standing in the middle of the garage my dad built with his own 2 hands, holding a 30-day eviction notice for the tools that were supposed to outlive us both. The same tools that just paid for the lawyer who wrote the damn notice to lose his office. And I'm laughing so hard I almost dropped the keys to the building I now own. The building where that smug bastard used to sip $12 lattes while planning how to steal my childhood home. Yeah, that's where we're starting, because 6 months ago I was on my knees in that same garage, sawdust in my tears, begging God to let me keep one single thing that still smelled like Big Mike Keller, the man who could fix anything except the heart attack that took him at 68. Right there between the table saw and the half-finished jewelry box he was making for Mom's birthday. I came home to Cedar Ridge Commons, this polished little kingdom of cookie-cutter colonials built in '97 where every lawn looks like it's afraid of getting grounded, and found Barbara Langford, 62, going on tyrannical, pearl choker tight enough to choke a horse, standing in my driveway with a clipboard and a smile sharp enough to shave with, telling me Dad's life work, 50 grand worth of Lie-Nielsen planes, Felder joiners, chisels that could split atoms, was now commercial equipment in a residential zone. And I had 30 days to make it disappear or watch the fine stack higher than the lumber Dad never got to use. You ever smell fresh-cut walnut and grief at the same time? That's what the garage smelled like when I opened it after the funeral, sunlight cutting through the dust like cathedral windows. Every tool hung exactly where Dad left it, like he was just stepping out for coffee and would be back to yell at me for using the wrong grit sandpaper. That smell hit me so hard I had to sit on his rolling stool, the one with the cracked leather he refused to replace because good enough is good enough. And I lost it, full-on ugly cried until my shirt was soaked, because that garage wasn't storage, it was church, it was therapy, it was the last place on earth where Big Mike still existed in 3 dimensions. And Barbara, with her white Lexus LX that probably cost more than Dad made in 10 years at the mill, she looked at that garage like it was a slot machine with my name on the jackpot. Day 3 she's back, tapping those acrylics on her clipboard like a velociraptor learning Morse code, telling me standards must be maintained, Mr. Keller, while her eyes inventory every Powermatic machine like she's already measuring drapes for the McMansion she's gonna flip my house into. That's when Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, 78, widow next door with roses that smell like forgiveness, pulled me aside and whispered through the fence, "Son, she did this to the Martins last year. Fence 2 inches too tall. Suddenly they're drowning in fines. House sold in 30 days to Barbara's realtor buddy for 60 grand under market." The way she said it, voice shaking with 15 years of bottled rage, I felt it in my bones. This wasn't about tools. This was about bodies, about picking off the grieving, the lonely, the ones who couldn't fight back, until the whole neighborhood was just a graveyard of memories with fresh paint and granite countertops. So I did what any son would do. I stopped sleeping. I started digging. County records at 2 a.m., HOA charters printed so many times my printer begged for mercy, and what I found made my electrician blood boil hotter than a stripped wire. The Cedar Ridge Prestige Association charter had a clause buried in subsection 9D that literally exempted inherited personal property maintained in orderly fashion, meaning Barbara didn't have a legal leg to stand on. She was just swinging the law like a club because she knew most people can't afford to swing back. But she didn't know who she was swinging at. Because I've been reading blueprints since I was 6, I've been pulling permits since most kids were pulling allowances. And when you've spent 20 years making sure rich people's McMansions don't burn down because some subcontractor cut corners, you learn exactly how far the rules can bend before they break someone. So I turned that garage into a goddamn work of art. Pegboards labeled like the Dewey Decimal System. Tools arranged by era like a museum. Floor epoxied so shiny you could see your sins in it. Took time-stamped photos from every angle. Sent Barbara a certified letter quoting her own charter back to her word for word. Thought that would be the end of it. Nope. Day 35. Certified mail hits like a brick. $1,800 in fines and counting. Lien on the house. And a lawsuit signed by Victor Hargrove, attorney at Hargrove and Associates. Suit so expensive it probably came with its own zip code. Shoes shinier than my epoxy floor. Voice dripping with that special brand of condescension reserved for people who work with their hands. He stood in my garage, cologne fighting the honest smell of linseed oil and losing. chuckled like I was a child showing him finger paints, told me creative interpretation won't save you. Mr. Keller, we have deeper pockets and sharper teeth. I watched him photograph my house like he was already listing it, heard Barbara whisper to her assistant Linda, "Hot market. This one'll go for $950 easy." And something inside me snapped and rebuilt itself all at once, because I realized they didn't want the tools gone. They wanted me gone, wanted the house empty, so they could flip it before the sawdust even settled on Dad's grave. That night, I couldn't sleep, just sat in the garage with a beer gone warm, running my fingers over Dad's favorite block plane. The one he used to teach me how to make a shaving so thin you could read newsprint through it. And I heard his voice clear as day. "Son, when somebody comes at you with a hammer, sometimes the only play is to buy the whole damn toolbox." So I did. You ever watch a snake try to swallow something bigger than its head? That's what the next 4 months looked like. Victor Hargrove's business card burned a hole in my pocket for 3 days straight. That downtown address, Summit Plaza Tower, 22 stories of glass and ego. And something about the way he dropped it like a king tossing crumbs to peasants made me Google the building at 3 a.m. while the coffee went cold and the grief went hot. Turns out the owner, Mr. Leonard Grayson, 79, wanted to cash out and move to Scottsdale to watch his grandkids grow up without snow. Asking $1.4 million. But the listing screamed motivated seller, the kind of motivated that makes realtors salivate and electricians with nothing left to lose start doing math. I did what any grieving son with a commercial license and a dad who taught him leverage is a tool would do. I sold the tools, not all of them. Never the ones Dad held the day he taught me how to join a board by hand. But the duplicates, the collector pieces, the 1920 Stanley set that some guy in Portland paid 20 grand for because it still had the original patina. $78,000 in cash in 3 weeks, plus Dad's house as collateral, plus every favor I'd ever earned from contractors who hated HOAs more than leaky roofs. Closed on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and reckoning. Walked out of escrow with the keys to Summit Plaza Tower burning in my pocket like a winning lottery ticket, then spent the night in the basement storage going through boxes the previous owner never bothered to move, decades of paperwork, old leases, and there it was, a manila folder thick with Barbara Langford's divorce settlement from 2019, where she tried to claim the building and lost because Leonard proved she'd hidden assets in the Caymans. The bitterness on those pages could have powered the grid. Suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't random cruelty. This was personal. Barbara couldn't own the building that anchored Cedar Ridge Commons, so she'd spend the rest of her life making sure nobody else got to enjoy living under its shadow either. I laughed so hard I scared the raccoons. Because now I owned the building. I owned Victor's lease. I owned the roof over his head and the parking spot he paid extra for. And his lease? Beautiful little month-to-month clause after the initial term. Rent locked at $9,200 when market was $13,500. Sweetheart deal he'd earned by doing Barbara's dirty work pro bono. So I did what any reasonable landlord would do. I scheduled a full code inspection. Turns out Victor's fancy office had unpermitted walls, electrical work done by someone who definitely wasn't me, fire sprinklers that hadn't been tested since Obama's first term. Fix it in 30 days or face lease termination. Same 30 days Barbara gave me to empty Dad's garage. The compliance letter went out the same day my attorney Claire Monroe, 36, shark in stilettos who grew up in a trailer park and hates bullies more than Mondays, filed our countersuit. Harassment, abuse of process, intentional infliction of emotional distress, plus a class action for every family Barbara had forced out since 2018. 12 plaintiffs at first. Then 25 when Mrs. Brooks started knocking on doors with her famous lemon bars and a notebook full of receipts. Victor's face when he got both letters on the same day? I wasn't there, but the security footage from the lobby is my new ringtone. That's when the dirty tricks went from annoying to felonious. Anonymous complaints to the state contractor board, flyers calling me a hoarder and a threat to children, tires slashed at 2:14 a.m., caught on 4K because I'd upgraded to cameras that could read the fear in someone's eyes from 50 yards. Guess whose face looked straight into the lens like a deer staring down a semi? Barbara Langford, pearl choker and all, knife still in her manicured hand. I didn't call the cops yet. I waited. Because Dad always said the best revenge is the kind they serve themselves. Saturday, 9:07 a.m., Cedar Ridge Community Center, smelled like burnt coffee and comeuppance. 300 residents packed in tighter than Dad's dovetails. News cameras in the back rolling live to 120,000 viewers and climbing. Barbara at the podium in a navy suit that cost more than my first truck, voice cracking like cheap plywood as she claimed to be the victim of a coordinated campaign by a disgruntled hoarder. I waited until she said property values for the third time, then walked down the center aisle carrying a banker's box full of her worst nightmares, feeling every eye in the room, feeling Dad walking right beside me even though his ashes were scattered over Lake Michigan last spring. Set the box on the podium like a mic drop made of evidence. 3 years ago, Barbara Langford told me rules are rules, I said, voice steady as a joiner fence. So let's talk about the rules she broke while writing new ones for the rest of us. Hit the projector. Up came the financials. $312,000 in HOA funds funneled to her husband's property management company for services that somehow included buying foreclosed homes at auction for pennies. Up came the photos of Barbara's own violations, unpermitted koi pond the size of a swimming pool, commercial signage for her side hustle, deck that encroached 6 feet into the setback. Up came the divorce settlement where she tried to steal Summit Plaza Tower and lost. Up came the 4K footage of her slashing my tires, hiding in Mrs. Brooks' bushes like a discount ninja, trying to pick my garage lock at 2:14 a.m. with a bobby pin and entitlement. The room went so quiet you could hear pearls hitting the floor as Barbara's necklace snapped from the string. Mrs. Evelyn Brooks took the mic next, 80 years old and twice as dangerous, voice clear as a bell. This woman stole homes, stole peace, stole joy, turned neighbors into enemies and memories into liens. Today we take it all back. One by one the plaintiffs stood, 25 families who'd lost barbecues, first steps, last Christmases because Barbara decided their grief was profitable. The tears weren't acting. The rage was biblical. That's when the deputies walked in, not for me, for her. Barbara Langford, you're under arrest for stalking, criminal mischief, attempted burglary, filing false reports, and about 14 other charges were still typing up. She tried to run, tripped over her own lawyer's briefcase, went down like a sack of overpriced potting soil, pearls scattering across the linoleum like hail on a tin roof. I waited until they had her cuffed, then held up the deed to Summit Plaza Tower, let it catch the camera lights like a championship belt. Oh, and one more thing, Victor Hargrove, your lease terminated at midnight. Boxes to the curb by 5, or I start charging storage fees, $500 a day, rules are rules. The applause started in the back row, old men in VFW hats standing first, then widows, then kids who'd never known a neighborhood without fear, built into a roar that rattled the windows, a sound of chains breaking, of graves opening, of a community remembering it was allowed to fight back. 6 months later, Barbara took a plea. 2 years probation, $120,000 restitution, 500 hours picking up trash on the highway she used to speed down in her white Lexus, license revoked so fast the ink didn't dry. Victor lost his law license, his practice, his reputation. Last I heard he's selling timeshares in Branson, still wearing suits 2 sizes too big for his new life. The class action settled for $2.1 million, paid by insurance so no resident saw a dime of assessment. Every family made whole plus pain and suffering. I turned Summit Plaza Tower's top floor into Big Mike's workshop, free carpentry classes for kids every Saturday, smell of walnut and possibility thick enough to choke on, Dad's tools in glass cases like the Smithsonian deserves. Ground floor's now the Keller Legal Aid Center. Claire Monroe runs it pro bono, helped 312 families beat HOA cases last quarter alone. The garage door doesn't creak anymore. I finally fixed that hinge Dad never got around to, but every morning when I open it the smell still hits me, sawdust and linseed oil and the ghost of Big Mike telling me I did good. We threw the first annual Cedar Ridge Freedom Fair last month, shut down Main Street, 2,000 people eating brisket and watching kids race Pinewood cars they built themselves. Mrs. Brooks won the pie contest with a lemon meringue that made grown men cry. I married Claire under the same oak tree Dad used to park his truck under. Gave her away with the block plane he used to teach me patience. Because some things are meant to be passed down, not sold off. But here's what still keeps me up at 3 a.m. When the house is quiet and the only sound is the hum of the Felder table saw I kept for myself. Was justice really served? Yeah. Barbara picks up trash in an orange vest, Yeah, Victor can't practice law in any state that shares a border with reality. Yeah, we got the money, got the building, got the happy ending. But Dad's still dead. Those families still lost years they can't get back. The kids who grew up afraid to play in their own yards still flinch when they hear a clipboard snap shut. Is 2 years probation enough for stealing someone's peace? Is any amount of money enough for making a man choose between his father's memory and feeding his family? Or is the real justice the fact that every time a new HOA president gets too big for their britches, someone forwards them the viral video of Barbara in handcuffs with the subject line, "Don't be Barbara"? Is it that Big Mike's workshop has a 2-year waiting list and half the kids in Cedar Ridge can now join a board by hand before they can drive? Is it that I get to wake up every morning to the sound of sawdust hitting the floor and no dad's laughing somewhere, proud as hell that his tools built something bigger than furniture? Maybe justice isn't a gavel. Maybe it's a workshop full of kids who'll never let another bully with a clipboard win. Maybe it's knowing that somewhere right now, a widow in Tennessee just got a call from her HOA lawyer demanding she remove her late husband's grill, and instead of crying, she smiled, opened her laptop, and typed Keller Legal Aid into Google. So tell me in the comments, all the way down where the real ones live, when is enough actually enough? When they pay? When they suffer? When they lose everything they tried to take from you? Or when the thing they tried to bury you with becomes the foundation you build an empire on? And if you've got a garage full of memories some suit wants to measure for curtains, if you've got a clipboard tyrant making your life hell, drop your story below. I read every single one. I forward the worst to Claire. We ride at dawn. Because Dad always said good tools deserve respect. But good people? Good people deserve to keep what's theirs. And sometimes the only way to make that happen is to buy the whole damn building and remind the bullies who really owns the ground they're standing on. Now go check your garage. Make sure the tools are sharp. Because the fight's never over. But neither are we.